Here's why Russia's Su-35 is the biggest threat to the US Air Force. Russia's Su-35, the best non-stealth fighter jet to ever fly. As history shows us, many times in war you do not always get to choose from the most optimal of solutions. Russia's Su-35 is a pretty good plane and would fight well. Russia's Su-35 fighter certainly has Western defense outlets buzzing, and for good reason. While many were indeed designed and planned for ahead of the imposition of sanctions, Russia is clearly making a big effort to modernize its armed forces, especially its air force, and moving past older Soviet platforms. The Su-35 is a good example of such efforts. The most potent flanker derivative is the Su-35, which is a much improved version with vastly improved avionics, engines and airframe. In the years ahead, this latest flankery is likely to proliferate around the world. The Su-35 airframe is a deep modernization of a late Cold War-era jet, but it's still no stealth fighter. So how would the Su-35 do against America's best planes? How would it fare against an American Air Force that is clearly the best in the world? How would, for example, the Su-35 do in a combat situation against Lockheed Martin's F-35 Joint Strike Fighter? How would Russia's new plane do against older aircraft like the F-15 or say F-16? Such scenarios matter, and not just in the context of a possible NATO/Russia or Middle East situation, but now that Russia is set to deliver the Su-35 to China, such comparisons matter even more. There are many places where all of these lethal aircraft will overlap, making such comparisons even more timely. The Boeing F-15C Eagle has been in service with the US Air Force for nearly 40 years, and will likely serve for decades to come. Over the years, the mighty F-15 has been upgraded to keep pace with evolving threats, but does the venerable Eagle still have what it takes to dominate the skies? The Su-35 is a genuinely dangerous war machine, and in many metrics, it matches, or even exceeds the capabilities of the latest upgrades for the F-15. In terms of pure kinematic performance, the Su-35 is slightly slower than the F-15C in terms of max speed, but it can out-accelerate the Eagle with its powerful twin Saturn Izdalai 117S engines, which put out 31,900 pounds of thrust each. Further, when the jet is relatively lightly loaded, it can maintain supersonic speeds without the use of its afterburners. While excellent acceleration at high altitude to supersonic speeds is a huge advantage, the F-15C is no slouch, and it wouldn't be a decisive edge for the Russian jet. However, where the Su-35 does have an insurmountable edge is at low speeds. The flankery has three-dimensional thrust vectoring and is unbelievably maneuverable at low speeds. However, given the advent of helmet-mounted cueing systems and high off-boresight missiles like the AIM-9X and Russian R-73, more often than not, close-in visual encounters tend to be mutual kill situations, as many pilots can attest. A lot of it is going to come down to pilot skill and, frankly, luck. At longer ranges, the F-15C and the F-15E still have the advantage over the Su-35 with their active electronically scanned array radars. The Raytheon APG-63V3 and APG-82V1 on the two Eagle variants are still considerably superior to the Su-35's Tikhomorov Irbis E phased array radar. The Su-35 does hold a fleeting advantage for now for passive sensors, since it has a built-in infrared search and track system, IRST, but the F-15 fleet will receive a very capable IRST in the near future, nullifying the flanker's edge. One area the flankery probably holds the edge is with its electronic warfare suite. The Su-35S boasts a potent digital radio frequency memory jamming suite that can wreak havoc with the AIM-120 AMRAAM missile. While American missiles are likely to eventually make it through, it will take many more missiles to achieve a kill than planners were counting on. The Su-35, meanwhile, carries a huge arsenal of air-to-air missiles versus the F-15 fleet's obsolete defensive electronics. The US Air Force is keenly aware of the problem, which is why it places such emphasis upon the $7.6 billion Eagle passive/active warning and survivability system upgrade. The real dilemma is that the Su-35 and the current-day F-15 Eagle are comparable, and that's what is worrisome for the US Air Force. The service is used to fighting adversaries where it has a huge technological advantage against the Su-35. That deficit does not exist, and the Flanker even has some advantages over the Eagle. Overall, if all things were equal, even a fully upgraded F-15C with the latest AESA upgrades would have its hands full versus the Su-35. But that would mean the United States would be fighting a war against Russia, or some other great power like China. That's not likely to happen. More likely to happen is that AF-15 would run into a Su-35 operated by some third-world despot. The pilots are not likely to have the training, tactics, or experience to fight against an American aviator with a realistic chance of winning. Further, Russian jets are not exactly known for their reliability. Combine that with poorly trained maintenance crews and lack of spare parts, some random third-world power is not likely to be able to generate a fully operational jet much of the time. Furthermore, other than Russia and China, a potential adversary is not likely to have an AWACS or full ground-controlled intercept capabilities, which further hampers the enemy. Bottom line, unless the F-15 is fighting World War III, the Air Force is probably going to be okay keeping the Eagle in service for another 2 decades. It might not be the one-sided turkey shoot the Air Force has gotten used to, but the United States isn't in danger of losing air superiority. The Lockheed Martin F-16 Fighting Falcon has been the mainstay of the U.S. and Allied air forces for decades. Over the years, the aircraft has evolved from a lightweight visual-range dogfighter into a potent multi-role warplane that flies the gamut of missions ranging from the suppression of enemy air defenses to air superiority. Though it has been operational since 1980, the Viper continues to evolve, and will remain in service with the U.S. Air Force and other militaries for decades to come. But while the F-16 remains a potent fighter, potential adversaries have caught up. The latest Russian aircraft like the Sukhoi Su-35 can match or exceed the Viper in many respects. While the Su-35 is more of an analog to the Boeing F-15 Eagle, Russia is selling many more flankers than MiG-29 Fulcrum derivatives around the world. Indeed, the U.S. Air Force usually has its Red Air aggressors replicate flanker variants, usually the Flanker G, rather than the MiG-29 or its derivatives during large force exercises like Red Flag or Red Flag Alaska. That's because derivatives of the massive twin-engine Russian jet are amongst the most likely aerial adversaries American pilots might face. The Su-35 is not the most common flanker derivative, but it is the most capable version built to date. In the right hands with properly trained pilots and support from ground controllers, or an AWACS, the Su-35 is an extremely formidable threat to every Western fighter save for the F-22 Raptor. The F-35 would probably be okay too if the pilots used its stealth, sensors and networking to their advantage. Tactics and training makes all the difference. What about the workhorse fleet of F-16s? The Viper doesn't have the latest upgraded F-15CS Massive Active Electronically Scanned Array (AESA) radar, nor can the F-16 usually lob the AIM-120 missile from the speeds and altitudes that the Eagle can attain. But then the F-15C was built as a dedicated air superiority fighter. Most in-service F-16s don't have an AESA installed at all. The UAE's advanced F-16E/FS have the APG-80 AESA, which has excellent capability, but that's a tiny fleet of aircraft. U.S. Air Force F-16s are not currently fitted with an AESA, and are at a severe disadvantage versus the Su-35 or other advanced flanker derivatives. The U.S. Air Force is keenly aware of the problem. The service had intended to retrofit 300 or so F-16s with an upgrade called the Combat Avionics Programmed Extension Suite, CAPES, but that program was cancelled because of automatic budget cuts known as sequestration. Nonetheless, the Air Force knows it needs to urgently retrofit the F-16 fleet with new radars sooner rather than later. Earlier this year, the Air National Guard issued an urgent operational needs statement calling for an AESA to be installed in their F-16s performing the Homeland Defense mission.